The Game of Thrones books and show are filled with horrific deaths. While for most, death marks the end of their story, for others it is just the beginning. But among the resurrected, no one has faced death more than Beric Dondarrion. The show doesn't really go into his 7 deaths, and in fact changes Beric's final death, turning it into a lackluster event. The books, on the other hand, are far more compelling, and Beric's final death has immense impact upon the rest of the story, as it unleashes an unspeakable evil on Westeros. But more on that later. This video will explain all 7 of his deaths and the impact they have upon his memories, health, and overall psychological state. Spoilers, it's not good. Before we get into all of that, I need to explain Beric's backstory to give context to his deaths and the man that he would become. In Book 1, at the age of 23, Beric is the leader of House Dondarrion and the Lord of Blackhaven. He is described as a handsome man with gold-red hair. Although he is a knight, he is untested in true combat, as the realm has known peace for decades since the Greyjoy Rebellion. During peace times in Westeros, the best way to prove oneself as a warrior and earn both renown and gold was to compete in tournaments. Luckily for Beric, Westeros is about to have one of the largest tourneys in years with the Tourney of the Hand to celebrate Eddard Stark's appointment into the position. So like many others, Beric journeys to King's Landing to compete in the tourney. However, Beric's inexperience becomes evident, and he is easily defeated first by a hedge knight and then by Thoros of Myr. Despite his defeat, Beric stays in King's Landing, and soon an alternative path to prove himself is presented when he is tasked by Eddard Stark to deliver the King's justice to Sir Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, who had been causing chaos in the Riverlands. Later in the books, Tywin reveals it was his plan to have the Mountain burn the Riverlands to draw Eddard Stark out to die. But the plan goes awry when Eddard is injured in his duel with Jaime Lannister. So instead, Beric, Thoros of Myr, and a few others assemble a small retinue and set out to take down Gregor. During their hunt for the Mountain, Beric and the boys are ambushed at the Mummer's Ford by Sir Gregor. Beric and his men attempt to retreat, but are overwhelmed. During the battle, the Mountain is in full-on beast mode. With a single strike of his sword, he killed Sir Raymond Darry and his horse. Eventually, Beric and the Mountain come face to face. Gregor charges Beric and impales him upon his lance, running him completely through. Mortally wounded, Beric falls from his horse into the waters of the Red Fork. His body would have been lost had it not been for the valiant effort of his loyal squire, Edric Dane, who pulled Beric from the river and drew his sword to defend his lord's body. However, Beric's wound was too much, and he died on the bloody grass banks of the Red Fork with a hole completely through his chest. In the aftermath of the battle, upon seeing his fallen comrade, the Red Priest Thoros of Myr administered the last kiss, a death rite practiced by priests of R'hllor. Thoros only intended to send Beric into the afterlife, but instead his mouth filled with fire and he breathed the flame of life back into Beric, restoring Beric's soul to his now broken body. Beric shuddered as the fire washed over him, and he rises for the first time through the power of the Red God R'hllor. All in attendance were astonished. Beric rallied his men and before the eyes of gods and men swore to uphold his oath to King Robert and resume his campaign for Gregor's head. But more than that, he pledged to protect the people from any injustice. And thus, the Brotherhood Without Banners was formed. During their quest to bring Gregor to justice, Beric and his men are pursued and attacked by Sir Burton Crakehall. During the skirmish, Beric and Burton meet in single combat. As the battle rages, Beric's flaming sword meets the cold steel of Burton's mace. However, Beric is a step too slow and is smacked upside the head. Crakehall's mace breaks Beric's helmet and shatters his skull, leaving Beric dead for a second time. Like before, in the aftermath, Thoros finds his fallen friend and administers the last kiss. And just like last time, Beric arises, now with half of his temple caved in where Burton's mace had found its mark. Sometime later, Beric and his men would catch up to Sir Burton, and the resurrected Lightning Lord would have his revenge on Crakehall and slay his one-time killer. Now, with a renewed purpose, Beric leads the Brotherhood in their noble cause. As Beric's legend grows, many flock to serve at his side, and the small folk are grateful for the Brotherhood's protection and frequently offer them shelter, food, and supplies. By this point, Westeros is in full-blown war, and the situation in the Riverlands grows even worse for the small folk as they suffer under the machinations of the High Lords and would-be kings of Westeros. Following his 2 resurrections, Beric is honor-bound by his oath to help the small folk, regardless of the personal cost. Looking to exploit this weakness, Sir Amory Lorch, a bannerman loyal to House Lannister, apprehends a poor beekeeper and his wife, who he suspected had been helping the Brotherhood without banners. Amory declared far and wide his intention to hang the innocent couple, unless Beric gave himself up. When this news reaches Beric, honor compelled him to do the right thing by the small folk, so he gives himself over to Amory at the Rushing Falls. However, instead of honoring his word, Amory hanged the couple and Beric along with them. Thoros eventually retrieves Beric's body and yet again fills Beric with the flame of life, returning his soul to his body for a 3rd time. After his first 3 deaths, Beric's body is looking pretty rough. There is a large wound in his chest from Gregor, half of his temple is caved in from Burton, and now deep cuts surround his neck from the rope that Amory used to hang him. Yet the War of the 5 Kings raged on, and Beric came face to face yet again with Gregor Clegane for a 2nd time. However, Gregor got the best of Beric, thrusting his dagger through the slit in Beric's visor, killing him again and taking Beric's right eye in the process. In the show, Beric implies that this stabbing occurred at the same time as his hanging at the hands of Amory Lorch, but it is left unclear when exactly this occurred in the books. Regardless, this marked the 2nd time Beric had been defeated and killed by the Mountain. Despite his 4th death, Thoros still manages to bring his friend back yet again. But now it is clear that the impacts of dying over and over are starting to take their toll upon Beric's memory, personality, and even identity. He states he can no longer remember elements of his life. He cannot recall the woman he was pledged to marry, nor could he find his way back to Blackhaven, the castle he grew up in and holds lordship over. All of his memories, no matter how important, have begun to slip and fade into nothing. He even questions if he existed at all before his first resurrection. Beric states the following: "Sometimes I think I was born on the bloody grass in that grove of ash, with the taste of fire in my mouth and a hole in my chest." Each time he is brought back, more and more of his soul is ripped from him, and only fragments are returned when he is revived, leaving him a shell of his former self. And yet, despite it all, something persists through each death. An unwavering purpose to deliver his oath of justice to Sir Gregor and protect the weak. It seems this purpose and the emotion tethered to it are the sole remaining core to Beric's being. At some point after this, Beric encountered Vargo Hoat and the Brave Companions, a group of sellswords from Essos who Tywin had paid to help win the war. During the encounter, Beric is reported to have been slain by Vargo, which all things considered was a great outcome for Beric. Had he been captured, his fate would have been far more dreadful. Hoat was well known and despised for his treatment of prisoners. He would typically chop off their hands and feet in an act of cruelty. In the books, it was Vargo who took Jaime Lannister's sword hand after somewhat falling out with Tywin. If Beric had been taken alive by Vargo, he would have likely met a similar fate, losing his hands and feet before being killed by the mad goat of Harrenhal. But luckily for Beric, he fell in battle instead. And like all the times before, Thoros found his friend's body and brought him back from the beyond. Beric's next death comes at the hands of Sandor Clegane, the Hound. After escaping Harrenhal, Arya and Gendry are taken to a cave under a hollow hill in the Riverlands by the Brotherhood without banners. At the same time, a hooded prisoner is brought into the hollow as well. Although his face is concealed, there was no mistaking the Hound. The Brotherhood had managed to capture him while he was sleeping drunk under a willow tree. As the Hound argues with Thoros, a voice comes from a man seated among the weirwood roots that weave through the cave. It is here we get a real description of what Beric looks like after dying 5 times. As a reminder, in Book 1, Beric was a slight, dashing young man with red gold hair, clad in a black steel breastplate with forked lightning bolts etched into the metal. By all accounts, Beric was a handsome man. His looks even caused Jane Poole, a friend of Sansa's, to fall instantly in love with him when she first sees him at the Hand's tourney. However, now, after 5 deaths and rough living, Beric is almost unrecognizable. The injuries he has sustained with each death mark his body. There is is a dent that has caved in his skull above his left ear. His right eye is missing, leaving only a socket, scarred and puckered. A dark black ring surrounds his neck where he was hanged, and below his now dented, battered and faded black steel breastplate, there is a gaping hole in his chest from Gregor's lance. The toll of 5 deaths has left Beric looking more like a corpse or a scarecrow than the once dashing lord that he was. Just as Beric's body has been battered, bent and broken, his mind too has felt the impacts of each death. Every time he falls in battle, his soul is ripped from his body, but when it is returned via Thoros' last kiss, his soul does not come back whole. Pieces have been chipped away, memories, motivations, and even love are all fragmented and forgotten. And what remains is only the emotions and purpose that he filled in the time of his death, which has led him to become oathbound and obsessed with completing his vow to hunt down the mountain and defend the innocent from injustice wherever he sees it. Beric is not loyal to any living man, but holds to the ideals and honor that he believed a true knight should exemplify under King Robert's rule. Additionally, now that Beric has died and been revived, his metabolic and bodily functions have in large part ceased, leaving him with no desire or need to eat or even sleep, which is extremely similar to another character who does not need to sleep, eat or drink, the Red Priestess Melisandre. The similarities between the two have left many fans to believe that Mel, like Beric, is actually undead. And although this idea is not fully confirmed in the books, it makes a lot of sense. But anyway, back to Beric's 6th death. Unlike the previous 5 deaths, we as the reader actually get to see Arya's point of view for this one. And as such, we have a lot more information regarding the event. After arriving at the Hollow Hill, the Hound is accused of murder by Beric and the Brotherhood. But just as in the show, the Hound denies the accusations. He believes that he is essentially just a soldier following orders of those in power, and cannot be held truly responsible for those that he kills in the line of duty. Arya then accuses him of killing Micah, the butcher's boy, but the Hound says again he was following orders from Joffrey. It is not his place to question princes. Beric declares that since no one knows the truth or falsehood of the charges, it is not the place of men to pass judgment upon him. Only the Lord of Light may do that. So Beric sentences the Hound to a trial by combat to allow the gods to prove his innocence or guilt. The Hound scans the room to find the man he needs to kill, but to his surprise, Beric steps forward, stating, "It is me you'll face." I think this speaks volumes to Beric's character. He expects no one else to administer justice, so takes the responsibility on for himself. After all, at this point, Beric believes himself to be an instrument of the Red God, so who better to deliver his god's justice? The Hound asks for his armor for the battle, but Beric responds, "Your innocence must be your armor." And to match his opponents in a fair and just manner, Beric removes his own breastplate so the pair can face each other on equal footing. Absolute Chad. Silence then fills the Hollow Hill as the Lightning Lord meets the Hound in single combat. Lord Beric draws his longsword and cuts his palm upon it, the blood washing over the steel, and in an instant the sword took fire. Upon seeing the flame, the Hound shudders. Though spoken in whispers, his fear of fire was well known, born from the childhood trauma of having his face pressed into burning coals by his older brother. Despite his fear, the Hound charged the Lightning Lord, and the pair clashed, but Beric meets Sandor's cold steel with the flame of his own. And thus an epic duel begins. The pair slash and cut at one another, dodging, parrying and blocking blows with their shields. The Hound tries to brute force his way through the smaller man, but slips and falls to a knee. Beric immediately cuts down at the Hound, who barely had time to raise his oak shield. With the battering of blows, the flaming sword eventually sets the Hound's shield on fire, and the flame spreads to his sleeve. Sandor desperately tries to free himself of the burning shield, and the crowd begins to sense Beric's victory drawing near, and they start chanting, "Guilty, guilty, guilty." Beric moves closer to finish the job, but with a defiant scream, the Hound brings down a powerful blow upon the Lightning Lord with all of his strength. Beric easily blocks the cut, but the burning sword snapped in two, and the Hound's cold steel plowed into Beric's flesh, cleaving him down to the breastbone. Beric fell to his knees, blood spewing forth from the wound, and the cave grew silent. Arya erupts with anger, screaming at the Hound that he is guilty and deserves to die for killing Micah, and demands a confession. The Hound merely laughs and admits he rode down the boy and cut him in two, but Arya goes to attack Sandor but is stopped. While this is happening, Thoros gives the last kiss yet again. Arya's outrage is interrupted when she hears Beric's voice, and she turns to see the Lightning Lord has been resurrected despite the mortal wound. True to his word, Beric allows the Hound to go free. Despite his guilt, Sandor won the trial by combat, leading Beric to believe that the Lord of Light R'hllor still had a purpose for the Hound. However, this purpose has yet to manifest within the books. As of the end of A Dance with Dragons, the Hound has been absent from the story for some time, though it is strongly implied he has taken on a new identity as the Gravedigger. So there might still be more to his story. That brings us to Beric's 7th and final death. 3 days after the Red Wedding, Arya experiences a wolf dream, a manifestation of her developing warging ability, where she inadvertently takes control of Nymeria, her direwolf in the Riverlands. Arya, through Nymeria, pulls the body of Catelyn Stark from the Green Fork. But then the wolf is spooked by the sound of men and horses approaching and flees. The men turn out to be members of the Brotherhood Without Banners, and Beric is among them. Upon discovering Lady Catelyn's body, Lord Beric's honor compels him to help the dead woman, and he himself administers the last kiss, passing his flame of life into Catelyn's body. Beric falls for a final time. His fragmented soul finally passes to the beyond, and he can rest. Ultimately, his life ends having failed his primary quest. He never managed to apprehend and kill Gregor, but in many ways he did more good for the realm by helping the defenseless, the innocent, and the small folk, which likely achieved more than killing Gregor ever would have. While Beric is gone, his flame is carried on by Lady Catelyn. Unfortunately, like Beric, Catelyn is returned to her broken body, and she is completely changed, both physically and mentally. In the 3 days since her death, her soul fragmented almost beyond recognition, and Catelyn returns to life, consumed with a singular desire for vengeance against those who betrayed and murdered her family at the Red Wedding. She takes control of the Brotherhood Without Banners and twists their once noble purpose, and begins capturing and hanging countless Freys and Lannister loyalists. She takes the name Lady Stoneheart, and as her legend grows, so too does her brutality. Physically, her body is mutilated. Her throat was slit, which has left her with a limited ability to talk. Her skin has turned pale and half decayed from her time in the water, and her face is shredded from the eyes to her jaw, where she had clawed at it in her grief after seeing Robb die. Eventually, Lady Stoneheart captures Brienne and her squire Podrick. In Catelyn's life, Brienne had served Lady Stark, but now she sees Brienne wielding Lannister steel and names her traitor. To prove her loyalty and to honor her oaths to Lady Catelyn, Brienne swears she is still faithful. So Stoneheart gives her a choice: to prove her loyalty by killing Jaime Lannister or die a traitor's death by hanging. Brienne opts to live, and last we saw she was bringing Sir Jaime to Lady Stoneheart. And for now, that is the last we have heard of Stoneheart and Beric's flame of life that she now carries. But that leaves a few lingering questions. Why was Beric brought back 6 times? How does it serve the plot? And how does this play into the Red God of R'hllor's plan? From what we have read, it can be speculated that Beric was revived so many times that he could simply act as a vessel for the flame of life, so that this flame could eventually be passed on to Lady Catelyn and bring her back as Stoneheart, which implies that Lady Stoneheart will have a pretty important role in the story moving forward. Some fans speculate that Lady Stoneheart will play a role in Arya's arc. Arya will see what a path of unstoppable vengeance leads to, and how it can twist and warp even the most noble of people and their intentions, ultimately forcing her to deliver a merciful final death to her mother and push her towards a less vengeful path. Although very different, the show also used Beric's final death in service of Arya's plot, so perhaps we can take this as a minor hint that Beric, Stoneheart, and Arya's stories are all interlinked. Other fans are more skeptical and believe that Lady Stoneheart's story will be more tied in with the goals of the Red God. They speculate that Lady Stoneheart, like Beric, will carry the flame of life for a time before passing it on to a character more central to the plot, which will finally create a true reborn champion for the Red God. Candidates for this include Jaime, Brienne, or even possibly Jon Snow. But of course, these are all just theories. We won't truly know the importance of the Flame of Life and the reason why Beric was allowed to die 6 times until we get another book. But what do you think? Comment below. Cheers.